The Lady's Reputation. Chapter 1. The carriage turns back. I returned to London in the same manner I had left it, behind drawn curtains, with my name held like a secret between my lips and my heartbeat. There are some cities that forgive. London is not among them. London remembers, through the tilt of a lady's chin, through the pause before a footman announces a name, through the hush that moves like smoke along a drawing-room wall. "Lady Marian Fox," my maid murmured as she fastened my cloak at the throat. "Will they know you at once?" "They will know," I said, "if they have not forgotten how to whisper." The carriage wheels clattered over the stones, and with every turn of the street I felt the old years rise again, those seasons of laughter and music, of white gloves and fresh roses, and then the last night, the last cruel hour, when everything I was had been reduced to a story other people told for sport. I had been 20 then, young enough to believe that innocence would announce itself, that truth did not require champions, that affection could not be made cowardly by public opinion. London taught me otherwise. The scandal had been a neat one. A set of missing pearls, Lady Harrowby's treasured heirloom necklace, disappeared from her dressing table on the very evening her house shone brightest with guests. A footman had seen me in the corridor. A lady's maid had claimed she heard my laughter behind a door, not my own. Later, when the pearls were found, at the bottom of a drawer in my own apartment, no one asked how they came there. No one asked what hand had placed them. They only glanced at my mouth, my hands, my blush, and decided I looked guilty enough. And then there was the other allegation, the one that stung more sharply than any jewel could, that I had lured a gentleman into compromising company in exchange for money or favour or the thrill of it. The gentleman's name was never spoken in polite circles, but it was everywhere. I had no need to hear it aloud to know it. Sir William Trent. Once he had been my admirer. Once he had looked at me as though I were not merely pretty but worth knowing. Once he had spoken my name like a promise. When the scandal broke, he disappeared. Not abroad, not into illness, simply into the convenient shadows where men may retreat when women are made to burn. I did not return to London for vengeance. That would have required heat and rage, and I had spent too long in cold places for that. I returned because I had grown weary of living as a ghost. Because my father was dead, my brother was gone, and there were no more family voices left to say, "Bear it, Marian, time will mend it." Time mended nothing, time only taught London to be more certain, but I had something now I had not possessed at 20. Evidence. A letter had arrived at my quiet cottage in Bath only a fortnight earlier, sealed in a hand I did not recognise. It had come through a solicitor who sounded uneasy on the page, as though the very ink wished to step carefully. Lady Marian Fox. I write at the request of Mr. Thomas Cresswell, formerly in service at Harrowby House. He is ill and fears he will not recover. He claims to possess knowledge of events surrounding the disappearance of Lady Harrowby's pearls and the subsequent injury to your name. He asks to speak to you, and only you. At the bottom, an address in Mayfair. Not Harrowby House, not Bath, London. I had stared at that letter until the words blurred and reformed. A servant's confession might be dismissed as bribery, a dying man's statement might be called melodrama. But it was a thread, and I had learned in years of solitude that a single thread is all one needs to begin unravelling a tapestry. So I returned. When my carriage drew up in front of our old townhouse in Berkeley Square, now mine, though it had been shuttered since my exile, I felt the faintest tremor in my breath. The facade stood unchanged, patient as a judge. My footman, newly hired and innocent of my history, bounded down to open the door with cheerful loyalty. "Welcome home, my lady." Home. I stepped onto the pavement and heard myself almost laugh. Inside, the air smelled of dust and lavender. My housekeeper had been summoned ahead and had done what she could. Candles burned in the hall, and a vase of winter greenery sat on the table like a cautious attempt at cheer. My steps echoed. My shadow moved with me, taller than I remembered. "Send word to the solicitor," I told my maid, "and inquire quietly about Harrowby House. Who is in town? Who is hosting? Who is thirsty for stories?" My maid hesitated. "You mean to go out, my lady? Into society?" "Yes," I said, the word clean and hard. "If they will not come to me, I shall present myself at their door and force them to look." That night, by candlelight, I opened the drawers of my escritoire and found an old bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. My own handwriting looped across some. Others bore the firm, masculine strokes of Sir William's hand. I had not opened them in years. I had told myself it was pride, it was self-preservation, it was dignity. But in the quiet, I untied the ribbon. The first letter I drew free was one of his earliest. I recognized it at once because it contained the line I had once repeated to myself like prayer. "I do not admire you for your beauty alone, Lady Marian. I admire you for your courage in being yourself." Courage. I let out a slow breath and folded the letter back into its place. I would not indulge in past tenderness. Not yet. 2 days later, I sent a plain card to Lady Harrowby's address, a request for a brief visit. I did not sign it with anything but my name, Lady Marian Fox. Then I waited. The reply came swiftly, too swiftly. A single line from her steward. "Lady Harrowby is not receiving. Not receiving." After ruining me, she would not even look at me. Very well. London might not receive me, but it would see me. And seeing, in this city, is always the beginning of trouble. So on the 4th evening after my return, I dressed with deliberate simplicity, a gown of deep charcoal with no ostentatious trimming, my hair arranged in a style modest enough to silence those who wished to accuse me of seduction. I wore no pearls. At my throat, I fastened a small silver locket. Inside it was nothing at all, no portrait, no curl of hair. It was simply there as a reminder that some things do not require proof to exist. I took my carriage to the home of Lady Wrexham, who was hosting a musical and prided herself on good taste, that is, on attending the winning side of every social battle. My footman announced me. There was a pause. Then the name moved through the room like a blade drawn from its sheath. Faces turned, fans stilled. A few gentlemen, mid-laugh, forgot themselves and stared. And then, at the far end of the drawing-room, I saw him. Sir William Trent stood near the pianoforte, a glass in his hand. He had grown leaner than I remembered, and his hair was touched faintly with the beginnings of silver. But his posture was the same, erect, controlled, as though he had trained himself never to reveal feeling even when feeling threatened to choke him. His gaze found mine, and in that instant, the years between us collapsed like paper. Regret looks like many things. In some men it becomes anger, in others it becomes cruelty. In Sir William Trent, it looked like stillness, like a man braced against the knowledge that he has no right to ask anything of the woman he failed. He set his glass down with a care that felt almost reverent, and began to walk toward me. Chapter 2. The weight of an old silence. No one came to greet me, not Lady Wrexham, not the fashionable widows who had once smiled at my jokes, not the young girls who had once begged me to teach them the proper way to pin a shawl. They were frozen in the dread that a scandal might prove contagious. I did not blame them. London teaches self-preservation early. Sir William reached me with the steady restraint of a man approaching a precipice. "Lady Marian," he said. His voice had changed. It was lower now, roughened at the edges, as though he had swallowed too many unspoken words. "Sir William," I answered, and gave him the smallest curtsy. He flinched at the formality. I saw it, the brief tightening around his eyes, the flicker of pain that passed before he mastered it. "You should not be here," he said quietly. I looked past him, at the room of faces pretending not to listen. I have been told that several times in my life. His jaw tightened. That is not what I meant. No? I allowed myself a faint smile. Then you meant to protect me. How novel. He swallowed. I deserve that. There was a silence, thick enough to feel. Somewhere behind us, a lady began to play a melody on the harp, light, careless notes meant to smooth the air. But music cannot soften a wound when the blade is still inside. Sir William inclined his head. May I speak with you privately? There it was, the politeness, the caution, the careful request. 10 years ago he would have commanded the room to give me space. 10 years ago he would have taken my hand without asking and dared anyone to object. 10 years ago I had believed him capable of anything. Now I knew what he was capable of most. Retreat. You may speak, I said, but not as though you are granting me some favour. His gaze held mine, as though I am asking it. We moved, slowly, with every eye tracking us, to a smaller sitting room beyond the main hall. A few guests murmured, and I imagined Lady Wrexham's panic blooming like a rash. But no one stopped us. No one wished to be the first to touch the scandal. When the door closed behind us, Sir William let out a breath that sounded like a surrender. I heard you had returned, he said. You heard, I repeated, and could not keep the bitter edge from my voice. And yet you did not call. I did not know if you would permit it. You did not know, I said softly, or you did not dare. His expression tightened. I have lived 10 years with the knowledge that I failed you. I folded my hands. That is a noble confession. It costs you little now. It costs me everything, he said, and the fierceness startled me. You think I have been comfortable? You think I have lived easily, knowing that the world treated you as it did while I stood aside? You stood aside, I said, my tone calm as ice, because it was convenient, because defending me would have meant risking your own name. He looked away. For a moment, the control slipped, and I saw the younger man beneath, the one who had once laughed with me in gardens and spoken of courage. You are right, he said at last. It was cowardice. There are insults I had rehearsed in solitude, speeches I had built to deliver to him if ever we stood face to face again. But hearing the word from his own mouth disarmed something in me. Not forgiveness, not softness, but the simple recognition that he was not pretending. I said nothing. He turned back, and his voice gentled. Tell me why you returned, Lady Marian. Because a man is dying, I said. A former servant of Harrowby House. He claims to know the truth. Sir William's eyes widened a fraction. Thomas Cresswell. You know him. I know of him, Sir William said carefully. He was dismissed some years ago. Dismissed, I repeated. For what? Sir William hesitated. For theft. I let out a short breath that might have been laughter if it had not contained so much cold. How fitting. The world always chooses the simplest story. His face tightened. You believe he will exonerate you? I believe, I said, that I will drag the truth into daylight if it kills what is left of my pride. He held my gaze. And if the truth wounds you further? I have been wounded, I said. I survived. Sir William was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, May I help you? The audacity of it made something flare, an old anger, a fierce refusal to accept assistance from the man who had withheld it when it mattered most. But another part of me, smaller, careful, considered the world as it was. London would not accept a woman's claim easily. A woman clearing her own name was considered immodest, almost worse than the original sin. A man's voice, however, especially his, might force doors open. I hated that truth. I hated how it tasted. I do not require your redemption, I said. His jaw tightened. I did not ask for it. Then why? His gaze did not waver. Because I was wrong, and because I do not wish you to stand alone in a fight I helped create. I studied him. It would have been satisfying to refuse, to let him watch from the edges as I did what I must, but satisfaction is a poor companion. It warms you briefly, then leaves you cold again. So I said, very well, but understand this, you do not lead, you follow, and if you falter, if you retreat even once, then you will never come near me again. His throat moved as he swallowed. Understood. When we returned to the drawing room, the air seemed to tighten. People pretended not to glance. Sir William offered me his arm as though it were the most natural act in the world. I accepted it. Not because I needed it, but because I wished them to see. Let them whisper, let them choke on it. The next morning, Sir William called at my house in Berkeley Square. I received him in the small study at the back, where the windows looked onto a pale winter garden. It was a modest room compared to the grand rooms of the front, and I chose it deliberately. Intimacy should never be mistaken for surrender. He placed his hat on a chair and stood before me, hands clasped behind his back. I have made inquiries, he said. Cresswell is indeed in town. He is lodged in a small house near Bloomsbury, under the care of a nurse. And Harrowby? I asked. Sir William's mouth tightened. Lady Harrowby is hosting a supper next week. Convenient, I said. A stage for her virtue. He hesitated, then said, Lady Marian, there is something you must know. The night the pearls disappeared. I lifted a hand. Do not give me fragments. Give me facts. His eyes met mine. The night the pearls disappeared, I was at Harrowby House. I stared at him, the air suddenly thin. You told the world you were not. I let them assume it, he said, voice rough, because the truth would have implicated you further. I was seen leaving a small sitting room near the corridor where you were, where people claimed you were. The old accusation, the whispered compromise, rose like poison. You were in that corridor, I said, my voice controlled. So the scandal was convenient for you as well. His face tightened. Yes. The honesty should have soothed something. Instead, it made the pain sharper. And you did nothing, I said. His gaze flickered. I did not know how to protect you without destroying you. You chose, I said flatly, to protect yourself. He nodded once, as though each movement weighed him down. Yes. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of a small clock. I watched the second hand move, relentless. Then I said, we will see Cresswell. Chapter 3. The Truth Has Teeth. Bloomsbury was quieter than Mayfair, its streets less polished, its air less perfumed. The small house where Thomas Cresswell lay was narrow and clean, but it smelled of illness and boiled broth. A woman with tired eyes met us at the door and curtsied. Lady Fox, she whispered, as though my name might wake the dying man. She led us upstairs. Thomas Cresswell was thinner than I expected, his skin drawn tight over his bones, his eyes too large in his face. When he saw me, he tried to sit up, but he lacked the strength. His mouth trembled. My lady, he rasped. You came. I came, I said, and moved closer. Tell me what you know. His gaze flicked to Sir William, and fear flashed. He is. Sir William Trent, I said. He is here because I allowed it. Speak. Cresswell swallowed. His voice shook, but there was determination under it, like a man dragging a heavy object across the floor. It were me, he said, not you. I put the pearls there. I felt something inside me still, not relief, not triumph, but a strange emptiness. The words I had hungered for had arrived, and yet they did not immediately warm me. They merely existed, sharp and ugly. "Why?" I demanded, his eyes filled with tears. "Because I were told. Because I were paid." "By whom?" My voice cut. He hesitated, coughing. The nurse leaned in, offering water. He drank, then whispered, "Lady Harrowby's daughter. Miss Lydia Harrowby." I remembered her, a delicate girl with soft eyes and a voice that trembled like a violin. She had been my friend, my supposed friend, who had held my hand at dances and called me Dearest Marion. I stared at Cresswell. Why would she do it? His expression tightened, as though the truth hurt him too. "Because she hated you, my lady. She wanted Sir William." The room tilted, and for an instant I had to grip the edge of a chair to steady myself. It was absurd, so small, so petty, so vicious. Sir William's face had gone pale. Cresswell continued, words spilling now that he had begun. "She said you were proud, that you made her look foolish. She said if you were gone, he would look at her instead. She said her mother would never suspect her, and if it were found in your drawer, well, she said, they already think she is too bold. They will believe it." My throat tightened. "And you?" "I was stupid," he whispered. "I were angry. I had debts. She promised me money, said she'd get me a place elsewhere after. But when it were done, and the house was in uproar, she panicked, told her mother I had been seen near the dressing room. They dismissed me." "And the pearls?" I asked, voice low. He swallowed. "She took them back the next day, said she'd hide them better. Later, they appeared again. I don't know how, but it didn't matter. The story had already stuck to you." Sir William stepped forward, his voice harsh. "Why did you not speak sooner?" Cresswell's eyes flicked toward him with old resentment. "Because nobody would listen. Not to me, not to her, not to anyone against Lady Harrowby, and because I feared what she'd do, she threatened me. I felt something in my chest tighten into anger so clean, it almost felt like clarity. Miss Lydia Harrowby, soft, trembling Lydia, had destroyed me with a rumour and a handful of pearls. And Sir William Trent had let it happen because the scandal had been convenient to his own silence. "Is there proof?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. "Anything written? Anything you can give me beyond your word?" Cresswell's trembling hand moved toward the bedside table. With effort, he pulled open a small drawer. From it, he drew a folded paper, creased and stained, and held it out. "A note," he whispered. "From her. I kept it. I don't know why, perhaps because I knew one day I'd need it." I took it carefully, as though it might burn. The handwriting was small and neat, the language cautious but unmistakable. "You will do as I said. Place it where it will be found. Speak to no one. You will be paid once the disgrace is certain." There was no signature, but there was a seal impressed in the wax at the bottom, Harrowby's crest. I felt my breath catch. Sir William stared at the note as though it were a confession carved into stone. "This," I said softly, "will do." Cresswell's eyes searched mine. "Will you forgive me?" The question was almost unbearable. I looked down at him, this thin, dying man who had been the instrument of a young girl's malice and a powerful family's cruelty. "I do not know," I said honestly. "But I will not let your confession die unheard." His eyes closed, relief and exhaustion mixing on his face. When we left the house, the winter air struck my cheeks, sharp as truth. I stood on the pavement and looked at the folded note in my glove. Sir William's voice came quietly beside me. "What will you do now?" I turned my head. What I should have done 10 years ago, though I had neither power nor proof. I will go to Lady Harrowby. He stiffened. She will deny it. She may, I said. But denial is not the same as victory. Sir William's gaze tightened. And Lydia. The name sounded strange in his mouth. I could not keep the edge from my voice. She will learn what it is to be whispered about. He flinched. Marian. I turned fully to him then. Do not soften it. Do not pity her. She did not pity me. His face tightened, guilt and something else warring. No, he said quietly. You are right. For the first time, I saw him not merely as the man who failed me, but as a man who understood that failure and did not hide behind excuses. It did not erase the past, but it shifted something, a crack in the wall. We returned to my carriage. I said, Tomorrow, you will call on Lady Harrowby and request an audience for me. He hesitated. She may refuse. Then you will insist, I said. Because she will receive you. He nodded once. Yes. That night, alone in my study, I read the note again and again. Each word felt like a nail hammered into my memory. I thought of Lydia's soft eyes, of her trembling voice, of how I had once comforted her when she cried over a broken dance card. There are girls in society who are taught to be kind, and girls who are taught to be helpless, and girls who learn that helplessness is the sharpest weapon they can hold. I had been ruined by a girl who knew exactly what she was doing, and yet, as I sat there with candlelight flickering, another truth rose as well, quiet, persistent, uncomfortable. I had been ruined not only by Lydia's malice, but by everyone else's willingness to believe it, including Sir William. When he arrived the next morning with a determined set to his jaw, I met him at the door myself. Are you prepared? He asked. No, I said, but I am going anyway. Chapter 4. The Reckoning and the Choosing. Lady Harrowby's house on Grosvenor Square gleamed with wealth and certainty. The footman who admitted us looked startled, then suspicious, as though my very presence threatened the silverware. We were shown into a small waiting room where the carpet muffled sound. Minutes passed like deliberate insults. At last, Lady Harrowby entered. She had aged but not softened. Her spine was straight, her expression composed in the way of a woman who had never doubted her own rightness. Her gaze flicked to Sir William, then fixed on me with cold distaste. Lady Marian, she said, as though the title itself were a stain. To what do I owe this surprise? I inclined my head. I am here for what you owe me, Lady Harrowby. The truth. Her mouth tightened. There is nothing to discuss. Sir William's voice cut in, controlled but firm. Lady Harrowby, you will hear her. Lady Harrowby's eyes narrowed. Sir William, I am astonished you involve yourself. Astonishment is wasted, I said. We have little time for it. I stepped forward and placed the folded note on the table between us. Lady Harrowby's eyes flicked down. For a moment, her composure held. Then her fingers trembled, so slightly most would have missed it. But I had learned to watch for cracks. What is this? She demanded. A note, I said, from your daughter to a former servant, instructing him to place your pearls among my belongings. Lady Harrowby's face went rigid. That is absurd. Is it? I asked softly. Then read it. She did not. Her gaze shifted, just once, toward the doorway, as though calculating escape. Sir William's voice tightened. Lady Harrowby. Slowly she picked up the note. Her eyes moved over the lines, her lips pressed together hard enough to blanch. Then she set it down with a careful, furious precision. This proves nothing, she said. But her voice lacked its earlier certainty. It proves, I said, that someone in your house orchestrated my ruin, And I have spoken with Thomas Cresswell. At the servant's name, something sharp flickered in her eyes. Anger, fear, recognition. "He is a thief," she snapped. "A liar." "He is dying," I replied, "and he has nothing to gain now." Lady Harrowby's chest rose and fell. For the first time, her mask threatened to crack. "You should have stayed away," she hissed. "You should have remained in your quiet little exile and left well enough alone." "Well enough," I repeated, voice low. "For whom?" She stared at me, and in her gaze I saw it, not only guilt, but a cruel sort of pragmatism, the belief that reputations are tools and those who lose theirs deserve the consequences. "You were careless," she said, as though justifying herself. "You were too familiar with gentlemen, too bold. People were already inclined to doubt you." I felt my hands curl. "So you believed I deserved it?" Lady Harrowby's mouth tightened. "I believed it was convenient." The words landed like a slap. Convenient. My life, my future, my name, dismissed as a social convenience. Sir William went very still. "And Lydia?" I asked. "Did you know?" Lady Harrowby's eyes flashed. She was young. "So was I said, the anger rising like flame, and yet only one of us was punished. Lady Harrowby's composure shattered in a sudden burst. "Do you think it was easy? Do you think it pleased me to see my daughter weep over a man who would not look at her? Do you think I would allow my child to suffer when you had everything?" I stared at her, the absurdity almost choking me. Everything! I had nothing but my name. Lady Harrowby's breathing quickened. My daughter's happiness mattered more. There it was. The blunt, ugly truth. I let out a slow breath and felt my voice settle into something colder and far more dangerous than shouting. "Then you will restore what you stole." She laughed, sharp and brittle. "How? You cannot demand society forget." "I can demand you admit it," I said, publicly. Her eyes widened with fury. "Never." Sir William stepped forward then, his voice like steel. "You will." Lady Harrowby's gaze snapped to him. "You cannot." "I can," he said, "because I have watched the cost of your convenience, and because if you refuse, I will ensure every drawing room in London hears the story from my mouth." Lady Harrowby froze. Men's words carry weight in a way women's rarely do. I hated that it took his threat to make her hesitate, but I would not refuse the weapon simply because I despised its necessity. "You would ruin my daughter," she whispered. I lifted my chin. "As she ruined me." A long silence fell. The ticking of a clock on the mantel seemed suddenly loud, like a heartbeat insisting on justice. Finally, Lady Harrowby's shoulders lowered, just a fraction. Her pride battled with fear of exposure, fear of scandal turning back upon her own house. "I will speak," she said, voice tight, "but it must be arranged, controlled, quiet." "Quiet," I echoed. "No, it will be heard." Her eyes glittered with hatred. "You are vindictive." "I am alive," I said, "and I am done being your ghost." 3 days later, Lady Harrowby hosted a small gathering, smaller than her usual assemblies, but filled with those who mattered most, the same ladies who had once smiled at my youth, the same men who had once glanced at me and decided I was dangerous. I arrived with my head high. Sir William stood beside me, silent but present, his very stance a declaration. Lady Harrowby rose before her guests, her face pale beneath the powder. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but she spoke. She did not apologize in the way I would have wished. There was no pleading, no tearful remorse. Lady Harrowby was not built for humility. But she said the words. There was an error, she began, and I could almost hear the room lean forward. Years ago, Lady Marian Fox was subjected to suspicion in my house. I now know that suspicion was misplaced. The matter of the pearls was manipulated. Lady Marian was not responsible. A hush fell so deep it felt physical. Someone gasped. A fan fluttered. I stood very still, my hands clasped in front of me, because this moment, this restoration, was not meant to be performed as triumph. It was meant to be claimed. Lady Harrowby continued stiffly. I regret the harm done. Regret, not apology, but enough. When she sat, the room remained frozen for a breath. Then whispers began, new whispers now, sharp and eager, rearranging the world to fit this altered truth. And in that instant, I understood something painful and liberating. Society did not care about rightness. It cared about permission. It cared about the moment it could pivot without losing face. Now, it had permission. A lady I had not spoken to in a decade approached me with trembling eagerness. Lady Marian, how wonderful to see you. How dreadful this has been. We were all so mistaken, as if they had tripped over their own cruelty by accident. I smiled politely. Indeed. One by one they came, some with genuine shame, most with calculated warmth. I accepted it all with the steady composure I had learned in exile. And through it, I felt Sir William's presence like a steady line behind me, not possessive, not demanding, simply there, as though he had finally learned that support is not a performance, but an endurance. When the gathering began to thin, I slipped into a smaller sitting room to breathe. My chest felt tight, as though I had been holding myself upright for too long. The door closed softly behind me. I turned and found Sir William there. You did it, he said, voice low. I did, I replied. He took a step closer, then stopped, as though remembering every boundary I had set. I am sorry, he said. I know the words are inadequate. I know they cannot restore what was taken. But I am sorry, Marian. You should have stood beside me, I said, finishing the thought. Yes. He bowed his head. Yes. I studied him. 10 years ago, I would have forgiven him on the spot, simply because I wanted to be loved. Exile had cured me of that hunger. Now, forgiveness would have to be earned, not through grand gestures, but through a quieter thing, truth and choice and consistency. What happens now? He asked. I looked toward the window, where the winter light lay pale over the garden. Now I decide who I am without their story. His voice softened, and without mine, I turned back to him. There was the old wound between us, still tender, but there was also something else now, an honesty that had not existed in our youth. We were not the same people. We could not return to what we were, but perhaps we could build something new. You once admired my courage, I said quietly. Do you still? His gaze held mine, more than ever. And if I choose to leave London again, I asked, if I choose not to endure their smiles and invitations, their sudden warmth, their convenient forgetting? I would understand, he said. I would not ask you to stay for my sake. And if I choose to stay, I pressed, if I choose to stand here and make them see me, truly see me, despite what they have done? His voice roughened. Then I would stand with you, publicly, unshaken. I studied him for a long moment. Then I said softly, You are asking me for a second chance. He flinched. No, I am not entitled to ask. But you want it, I said. His voice came out like truth dragged from somewhere deep. Yes. I felt something in my chest tighten. Not pain this time, but the unfamiliar sensation of being offered something without manipulation. I stepped closer, still at a proper distance, still careful. "Then hear mine," I said. "If there is to be any future between us, it will not be built on your guilt. I will not be your penance." His eyes flickered, searching my face. "It will be built," I continued, "on respect, on listening, on a loyalty you show before anyone demands it." He swallowed. "Yes. And you will accept," I said, voice steady, "that I may never fully forgive what you did." His eyes tightened. "I accept it." Silence stretched between us, full and weighted. Then very slowly, Sir William reached into the inside pocket of his coat and drew out a small object, a folded ribbon faded with time, the very ribbon I had once used to tie his letters. "I kept it," he said, voice low. "I did not deserve to keep anything of yours, but I did." I stared at the ribbon, and something in me softened, not into sentimentality, but into the recognition that he had carried a piece of our past, like a wound he refused to let heal too easily. "I burned nothing," I admitted, "not even the letters." His breath caught. "You did not?" "No," I said. "I simply refused to read them." He nodded, as though that was fair. Outside the sitting room, the last guests were departing. The noise of society began to fade, leaving only quiet. Sir William did not reach for my hand. He did not step closer than propriety allowed. He simply looked at me, as though waiting to learn whether I would permit him any place in my life at all. I felt the old pride rise, wounded, fierce, protective. But I also felt something else, the steady strength I had forged in loneliness, the certainty that I did not need a man to rescue me, which meant, at last, that I could choose one without desperation. "I will remain in London," I said. Hope flickered across his face, quickly checked. "For now," I added, "on my own terms." He nodded. "Always." "And you," I said, letting my voice soften the smallest amount, "may call on me again. Not because you must, not because you owe, but because I am willing to see what kind of man you are when fear is no longer your excuse." His eyes shone with something that looked dangerously like relief. "I will come," he said, "and I will be worthy of the permission." I inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the years settle into something finally bearable. Then I opened the door. We stepped back into the world together, not as a triumphant couple paraded for approval, but as two people who had suffered, learned, and chosen. Society would gossip, society would speculate, society would attempt to rewrite history in its own favour. Let it. My reputation had once been a story told about me. Now it would be a life I lived in full view, unapologetic, honest, and entirely my own. And if love came again, slow, earned, steadfast, it would not be the kind that asks a woman to shrink herself for safety. It would be the kind that stands beside her when the room turns cold, the kind Sir William Trent would have to learn to be. The kind I, Lady Marian Fox, had finally decided I deserved. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette